Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So, wherever you're joining us, again, we just want to say welcome, and we're so thrilled that you continue to journey with us through these different texts, through the different interpretations, through this study. This has been so much fun. And so, again, what we do here at Ethos, I would argue, is it's pretty rare, right? We take the Bible and we delve so deep. We look at the words, we ask original intent of the author, we look at who this is written to, we look at the time period, and then we also understand here at Ethos that this book, the Bible, is written by Jewish people. And so it's really important to understand who are the Jewish people, right? What did it mean to be a Jew? Who were the best rabbis who gave the best interpretations, the most common interpretations. We've studied so much of that so that we can understand it and then share it with you. And of course, after we learn the original intent, after we study and really understand the text within its context, then we choose to make an applicable, relevant application today. And so that's what we do here at Ethos, and it is such a joy to do every week. And so, as a reminder, we're moving through the book of Genesis. And so, Genesis, again, not a history book, not written in order to give specific literal dates and times and peoples, right? The Jewish people who wrote these pieces understood when you're looking at the story of creation, it is deeply metaphorical, right? When you see different messianic archetypes like Abraham, Joshua, David, Moses, all these different individuals, they understood it far deeper as a metaphorical messianic archetype than they did a literal person. And I say that understanding that they very well could have been literal people, but also they understood we are looking at Israel miniaturized through every telling. And so as we delve in, again, we remember Genesis was written, compiled during Babylonian captivity. And again, the reason was not for historical purposes. It was because they were afraid they were going to assimilate. They were afraid that, like other tribes, they would take on Babylon's gods, Babylon's rituals, Babylon's traditions. And so the Hebrew people at that point, this tiny, tiny little tribe, pretty new onto the scene historically, they said, we're not going to assimilate. We're not going to take on those tribes. We are monotheistic. We believe in worshiping one God, right? And so that's what they do. And they compile all the stories, all the wisdom writings, everything they can into one piece they call Torah: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And so that's a kind of a quick study, a quick rundown of how Torah is compiled, how to view Torah, all of that. That's how we do it here at Ethos. And it's, again, I would argue, so important to do the responsible study first. And so, again, we're moving through Genesis. We've stepped into chapter 35. And so, again, it's taken a while, hasn't it? We've almost up to 2 years of this study, and I think it's kind of cool to be able to tell a friend, look, the group I'm connected with, we spend time and energy. We do not take these books lightly. And to be able to say you did a Torah study, similar to someone that would basically be taking rabbinical studies, this is what it would look like. To be able to say you've done that, I think is pretty cool. And so today, chapter 35, and we're only going to cover 7 verses. But within these 7 verses, there is so much depth. To go any further into this chapter would be silly because there's so much beauty here that I want to share with you today. So let's delve in. We just finished the story in chapter 34 of Dinah being kidnapped, Jacob's sons going out and murdering this other tribe of people, and basically making Jacob look actually worse, right? And so after this happens, Jacob and his people, they must run because the other tribes now, they're furious. They see Jacob as someone to be feared. And so when you're fearful of another tribe, you attack, right? And so Jacob and his family, they have to run, right? They got to get out of Dodge. They have to take off. And so that's kind of the context of verse 35. So let's read it together. Here we go. Genesis 35, 1 through 7. And God said to Jacob, "Arise and go up to Bethel and abide there, and make there an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. Thereupon Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, remove the deities of the foreign nations which are in your midst. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. And we will arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar to God who answered me on the day of my distress, and was with me on the way that I went. And they gave Jacob all the deities of the nations that were in their possessions, and the earrings that were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem. Then they traveled, and the fear of God was upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue Jacob's sons. And Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, and all the people who were with him. He built there an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, for there God had revealed to him when he fled from before his brother Esau. So, not a lot to work with right on the surface. But even though this is oftentimes kind of, read over and you get to the good stuff, right, where his name changes, there's actually some really in-depth stuff here. So let me show you what I mean. So first off, verse 1, notice this. Arise, go up to Bethel, and abide there, make an altar to God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. There is an interesting tradition here in verse 1. If you look at all the rabbinical traditions, interpretations of verse 1, there are many. But there is one specific one that I find really, really interesting, and it is kind of like the popular one. It's the tradition, the traditional interpretation that kind of won the day as far as Judaism goes. So this one is by Rashi. He is this medieval era rabbi who has his interpretation is probably the most famous of this. So he says this: since you tarried on the way, you were punished, and this trouble with your daughter has befallen you. That's how he interpreted this, which is the popular way of viewing it. So basically, understand what they're saying here. They're saying because the children of Israel got sidetracked, did the wrong thing, the promised land is going to be difficult to find. Right? Because the children of Israel has been so often sidetracked on their journey, oftentimes issues will arise. And so in this moment again, the idea here is that they are punished. And so we've seen this in their story, haven't we? As we read through Torah, we'll see Israel, they go into the wilderness, right? They are wandering, and they have these moments where they step off the path. And so we have these moments where they worship Baal, right? Everything's going well. They get the 10 Commandments and bam, Baal worship, right? They get sidetracked. They move in the wrong direction. You'll find moments where they're fighting, they're stealing from their neighbors, they're disrespecting each other, their God. This tribe of the Hebrew people, they oftentimes find themselves going off track. And so not a big surprise that in chapter 34, we found Israel, Jacob's sons, right? They go off track. They do the terrible, terrible thing in response to a terrible thing, right? And so again, the idea here is Israel sometimes they make really poor decisions and they get punished. Now, notice this word punished. Remember, it's important to note here when you see this word punished, understand the ancient tradition here. That's how they viewed God, right? They didn't allow the idea of like this is natural consequences happening. That's not how they viewed the divine. Everything that happened was because either the gods or their God was angry or happy. It all depended on the current disposition of that God. And so it's not a surprise that you would see oftentimes ancient rabbis saying they're being punished, right? God is punishing them. Now, here's the beauty, though. When I hear that, I often cringe, like probably many of you, because I think we have a different perspective. And here's the reason we have a different perspective now in 2022. We have a different perspective because of verses like this. In the Old Testament, there was a trajectory that was moving away from this idea of God constantly punishing his people. There was a movement away from this. It was steady, but it was slow. And so God's people are on a trajectory, right? And so in Deuteronomy, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. I think that's so beautiful. Even in the midst of so much of this idea that the gods are angry, that God is going to punish you if you do the wrong thing and give you good things if you do the right thing. It's so beautiful to know that even in the midst of all of that, this tribe was moving on a trajectory. They were beginning to understand the divine better and better. And I think this is a step in the right direction. Even in Deuteronomy, they understood or beginning to understand that the divine walks with them, does not leave them when they are naughty, doesn't just gift them when they're good. The blessings, we're told, fall on the good and the evil, right? In the New Testament, we hear this, which is really a reflection of an Older Testament verse. And so when we get to Romans, I love this. What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? First century, we have Jesus enter the picture, and it even shifts it even more. This idea that not only is God for you, He's completely for you. He's actually walking with you. He, she, however you want to describe God, right? The divine walks with you and is actually in favor of you. You don't have to gain the divine's favor. The divine already favors you. That is a mind-blowing concept. And we see it with Jesus in this moment. And I love this verse so much. It's so beautiful. Go and learn the meaning of the words, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Jesus takes it even a step further on this really interesting trajectory, right? He says, look, I know our people have been sacrificing for a very long time, but here's the thing. The divine actually never asked for it. The divine actually never needed it. God never wanted those things from you. God is not angry with you. God is for you, not against you. This trajectory continues moving, and it's so beautiful when you get to the first century people and you see this picture from Jesus. It's actually really compelling. And I know we kind of stepped off of our text a little bit, but it's so interesting to know that, yes, it says they believed that God was punishing them. But we know that Scripture is on that trajectory. These people were moving, and their ethic and their values were changing, growing. They were understanding their world better and better as they grew. So again, interesting concept to think about. But let's keep going. So verse 1, notice this word arise. I love this word arise within the context. The idea here, kwame, the word here means to ascend upward or to soar. So think about this. Jacob and his people, they messed up again, right? They went on the wrong path. They murder their neighbors after getting them to be circumcised, right? Like, it's a pretty big blow. That's painful. That's so, not the direction to be headed. And so what does Jacob do after they make the mistake? After they experience brokenness, Jacob says, I'm going to rise. I'm not going to keep stumbling and fumbling through it. I'm going to get back up and we're going to make better decisions. We're going to get back on the path. So good. Verse 2, it says this, Jacob says to his people, remove the deities of the foreign nations which are in your midst. So there's like a 3-part process here that I want to share with you. And when you read through this, you'll understand for the Hebrews, there's always a 3-part process when it comes to something we call sanctification, right? And the idea is you are learning, you're growing, you're experiencing good, bad, and ugly. And as you experience it, you gain wisdom. That's the Hebraic idea of what sanctification meant. It was just essentially learning to grasp wisdom and let it change you. And so 3 parts here. Notice this first one. Jacob says to his people, remove the deities, right? Remove the foreign objects. He's basically saying, remove the things that are holding you back. So in order to move towards shalom, right, we must remove what holds us back. In order to experience peace more fully, Israel was understanding there are certain things we have to remove. There's certain things that continue to hurt us, hold us back when we're on the path that keeps pushing us off path. And so those things we have to learn to remove. And when I think about the story, I know many of you are thinking about it too. right? We look at the ark, right? There's this interesting moment. The whole ark story is really it's told right here in this 3-section piece, advice that Jacob gives his people. Right, it's a reminder of the ark. The storm is coming. Right, the earth is wiped clear. Things are removed. Right, stuff is removed off the table, so that again we can reset the table and then enjoy what's on the table. And so this is the concept we see even in creation. So think about the beauty of this text. Jacob is telling his people, because any Jewish person reading this is making the connection. They're making the connection to the flood. They're making the connection to creation. What Jacob is saying to his people is, we are starting over. We're going to start over and we're going to take things off the table first. We're going to take the things that are cluttering our lives and hurting us. And so we remove the stuff off the table. And then notice this, though. The next part is purify yourselves. And I like this because it's almost like a step further from the creation story to the flood story. Abraham, Isaac, now Jacob. Jacob takes it, again, we talked about trajectory. Jacob takes it a step further. He says, purify yourself. And I love this concept. Essentially, think about what it means to remove impurities from like metals or things, right? You get it warm enough, and those impurities, that material, all of a sudden becomes purer and purer. And oftentimes we'll say it's stronger and stronger, it's more beautiful. It's so much better when the impurities are removed, right? And so the idea here for Israel was that we take things off the table and then we look within. We ask ourselves, what are the things holding us back from fully experiencing shalom? Stuff has been removed. Now we have time to think. Now we have time in the ark to meditate, to think about where we are, where we're going. Purify yourselves. That's the idea here behind this. Jacob is telling his people, we're starting over, right? We are resetting the table. And then number 3, change your clothes. So after things are removed, after you've had time to sit in it, right, to think it over, to change, to shift, there's going to be the moment with the ark where you get off the ark and you walk in the new thing. There's going to be the moment in the creation story where after things are moved, after the waters are shifted, then you begin to put animals and birds and you fill the thing with good things. And so this idea of changing your clothes, this like the ark metaphor, right? This like the creation metaphor, it is deeply metaphorical. And so the idea, when you would read ancient traditions, metaphorical writings, the heroes and the heroines, what they would do often is after they went through the traumatic, they beat the dragon, they survived the attack of the ogre, whatever the thing was, whenever they got on the other side of it, they were given new clothes. They were given new weapons. They essentially, they changed the way they looked on the outside, right? This tradition we see over and over again. Anyone familiar with Lord of the Rings? Yeah. If you are, you will make the connection immediately. I know you thought about it. Gandalf, right? Gandalf the Grey, after he goes through this removal of who he thinks he is, he experiences this moment where he fights the evil being and beats them. After he falls down the pit, he comes back up. The resurrection moment happens, and when it does, he is Gandalf the White. Right? He has the white tunic instead of the gray. He becomes this amazing individual who now does great things in the world, right? Even greater, because his character has shifted. And so you can see again, over and over again, these concepts in ancient traditions. The changing of the clothes would have been a big giveaway to anyone reading it. Jacob and his people have changed. There is a resurrection. Something's happening in Israel. Right? They've removed the things, they've purified, and now they are ready to walk in the new. And that 3-part concept, again, you'll see that death, resurrection over and over again. You see the concept played out. It's beautiful. There's the death, there's sitting in the ark, and there's resurrection. There's Jonah, right? He goes down to the bottom of the deep. Right? Depth, right? He dies. Then there's the day of waiting, and then he's resurrected. We see this over and over again. The idea here, he changes the clothes, is deeply, deeply metaphorical. Let's continue. And so, verse 3, and we will rise and go to Bethel, and I will make an altar, and the one who answered me on the day of my distress and who was with me on the first day. This is a loaded, loaded verse. Verse 3. Understand this, Bethel. This idea, this is the place where God is, right? This is where life is. He raises and he experiences life fully. Bethel. This is the idea. He doesn't go to a literal place, Bethel. The metaphorical beauty of this is after Jacob goes through this three-part process, he experiences God fully. Right? Oh, I love this. Altar. Why does he place the altar? Well, again, if you're Hebrew, if you're a nomadic tribe, this idea here is we're going to remember this moment, right? We don't want to forget those moments where we've gone through death and resurrection. We want to remember these moments so that we can celebrate them, but also so that we might learn from them. Right? And so that's why you create the altar. And so for many Jewish people, Torah is their written altar. It's the altar that they get to carry with them wherever they go. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture, isn't it? Yeah. And then notice this, the beauty of this description of the divine. I really enjoy this. God answered me. Think about how different this picture is than any of the other gods on the scene during this moment in time. The other gods, you'd have to beg, scream, cut yourself, do crazy things to get their attention. This God, you don't have to do any of it because this God walks with you. This God answers you. This God is for you, not against you. We go back to this idea. And again, notice, was with me on the way that I went. This God walked with me. This to anyone in any of the other tribes would have been astounding. Wow, our gods sit up there. Your God walks with you? What a God, right? This would have been really earth-shattering for any other tribe to hear. Your God walks with you. Your God answers you. It's really a pretty interesting trajectory when you think about it. Verse 4, and they gave Jacob all the deities of the nations that were in their possession and the earrings that were on their ears, and Jacob hid them underneath Terebinth that was near Shechem. So first off, this is not a way in which we should say earrings are evil, right? No. Oftentimes you'll see the jewelry, those kind of things often would be, they'd be wearing like Baal earrings, or they'd have like different ancient inscriptions of different gods. And so there are times when Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, Yahweh says, wear the jewelry, wear the nose ring, and then other times take them off. Take them off is almost always exclusively when they put on the jewelry that is related to Baal or other gods. And so in this moment, it is not a knock toward earrings. Wear your earrings if you want to wear them. The idea here is something much deeper, right? The idea here is that Jacob is basically helping his people move away from their past mistakes. He's saying we need to be in a new alignment. And so this word, terebinth, it's such an interesting one. It means this. It means a tree that does not bear fruit. Interesting, right? A tree that does not bear fruit. This is a reminder for them that, look, if we assimilate, if we continue wearing the jewelry of other gods, the rituals, the traditions of the other gods, we will bear no fruit. We will be like this worthless tree. Wow, right? Really interesting. Terebinth, this idea of fruitless tree. If we do these things, we'll be like a worthless tree. Our fruit, we will not bear fruit. We won't bear life wherever we go. Heavy. Verse 5, notice this. They traveled and the fear of God was upon the cities that were around them. Oftentimes I've seen people try to play mental gymnastics with this. Well, it was like the tribes respected them, but actually this word fear here, it actually means translated, they were in terror. Right. And so it's interesting. The idea here is the enemies of Israel, they would not attack them because they were scared of them. And is this again true? Is this how their Israel's God really is? Well, no, right? They're on a trajectory. But the idea here they wanted to give the audience is Israel was safe. Israel is safe from their enemies now because they've gone through this process. It continues, verse 6. And Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people who were with him. So Canaan, right, the land of promise, fullness, all of that. But notice this, Luz. What does this word mean in the Hebrew? Yeah, interesting stuff. In the Hebrew, this is a fruit-bearing, a nut-bearing Luz, the almond tree. Yeah. So again, so interesting. Now they move toward a tree that bears fruit. So they move from terebinth to Luz. Anyone reading this moment would have been like, oh, of course, right? We've moved from a tribe that bears no fruit to a tribe that bears fruit. Because we went through this process from death to resurrection, from death to life, we are now a group that instead of not bearing fruit, now everywhere we go, we are like the almond tree. We are bearing good things, right? There is nutrition. There's something we're giving now. It's something we can eat from. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture. And if you've seen the almond tree, you'll know it's beautiful. It's flowery, right? There are moments where it's just filled with these beautiful flowers. It bears beauty. It bears the fruit, right? It's a really cool metaphorical concept there that I would argue most people are going to miss unless you delve deep. And so notice this, 7, it says now instead of Bethel, it's El Bethel. And there's something again fascinating here. The idea here is this is where the house of God is, where God abides. Almost sounds like, well, duh. But the bigger idea here is this is where God is not just abiding, but it's where the divine is revealed. And so it's where God abides, but it's also where not just sits in it, but as you come close, God reveals the deeper mysteries, the deeper pictures. It is the beautiful picture of if we move through the process, we experience the divine revealing itself to us deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And that's where the fruit happens. This picture, I just love it. I didn't want to push too far in this. I wanted to go through these 7 verses because I knew you would see the beauty too. It is a beautiful, beautiful picture about death and resurrection, new birth, what it looks like when we take time to stop and to gather, regroup, and move forward again. It's a really beautiful picture, especially after a big mistake has been made, right? You made the mistake, it was painful. And the question is, what do you do next? Do you give up? Do you beat yourself up? Or do you say, you know what? No, I'm going to keep moving forward in a new, powerful way. And this is what Jacob and his people choose to do. And really, it's a story for these people, these ancient people in Babylon. And it's saying, look, we've made mistakes over and over again. We're going to correct it now. And we're going to do it the right way. And so I started thinking, how do we take this home? And I thought, no, we don't. It's right there. It was right there the whole time. Remove, purify, change. What do we do when we experience a conflict, a moment of brokenness, a big, huge mistake? When Jacob's people do the thing that hurts them most, what do? The answer? Remove, purify, change. And I started to think about how that's applicable for us now. Because most of us are not carrying around idols or whatever on our chests or any of this kind of stuff. So I started thinking, how does that apply today? And this is kind of where I moved through it. Remove. I think this is so important on a physical level, but also a spiritual one. Decluttering your life. And I've said this so many times in the past. Declutter your life. If you've got a really cluttered garage, it's incredible when you declutter that thing. It's so interesting. The rest of your life, you begin to notice new things pop up and you have space for stuff again. And I would argue in the spiritual life, it's the same thing. When you declutter, when certain relationships don't work anymore, when certain doctrines, ideas just don't fit anymore, when you remove those things, there's now space for better and better things to fill it. And so we declutter, we remove so that that space can someday be filled. Number two, purify. I love this idea of sitting in the ark, right? You're at the bottom of the ocean, the belly of the whale. That moment where the silence, the Sabbath is made, right? It's that moment where things are just still. And so in that stillness, that's the moment where we think about our life, right? We think about our values. We think about the things that, is this worth my time or not? Right? We sit, we consider life again, and we purify those things. We decide, I want this thing. This thing doesn't fit with my ethic anymore. This thing doesn't fit with my values anymore. And in those moments, we think, we consider, we really move through. Does it work with me or not anymore? It's about sitting with the thing, asking deeper questions of the problem at hand, the mistake that you may have made. You sit with it, you ask deeper questions with it. A Jewish rabbi might say, you Sabbath with the thing, right? It's a really cool idea. And then lastly, change, right? You change. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where once we've done the steps, we allow time for the change. That's when we say, okay, look, I know I'm going to stumble. I know I'm going to fumble, but I'm going to attempt now to walk in the new thing. Now that space has been made, right? Now that the ark, I've been sitting in it for 40 days, 40 nights, I can finally get off. And yeah, it's a weird new world, but I'm going to do my best to navigate through it. Will I make mistakes? New mistakes, of course. But you learn to navigate now. You walk in the new thing. And this is the idea here with change. We learn to live the change openly. We don't keep going back, right? We don't get back into the ark. We step forward bravely and we try out the new thing. The relationship was ended that we knew was toxic. We walk in the new. We're open now to new connections, new relationships. The old way of understanding the divine died. We don't go back and carry those things with us. We walk in the new. We're now open to the new ideas of what God is really like. Love, right? God is love. We understand the deeper pictures of what Jesus told us. We walk in those new things now. And now we have space for them to grow. It's such a beautiful idea. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. That was so much fun, so much beauty there. And so, as always, please consider going to ethos-church.org/donate. We are a tax-deductible denomination. We continue to basically your donations are the engine that keeps us moving. And so we do so much study. We work so hard to bring this every single week. And so please consider donating there. If you want to connect with us live, please go to our Ethos living rooms. That is a lot of fun. And as always, hit the subscribe button, share this YouTube channel with friends. We want this to continue growing. Folks, I cannot wait to continue moving through Genesis with you. We're getting closer to moving through this book, and it has been really, really powerful. Everyone, I can't wait to see you next week when we finish chapter 35. We're going to move through it a little bit more. It's going to be really good. Everyone, take care, and we'll see you next week.